Death is a topic that occupies every one of us, but it is at the same time one that we rarely take the time to really think about. We tend to turn away from the thought of death because it stirs a deep fear in us. Basically, a fear of the great unknown. But we don't want to see death as an ending. We want to see it from the perspective of the soul, which does not see an end, but a continuation, a new movement in the same stream of life we are already living in right now. Throughout history, people have tried to understand the significant moments that follow the last breath of a human being's life on earth. People of the past were aware that what we call death is not a destruction or an end, but a transformation, a change in the form of consciousness. The Egyptians called this process the way of the Ba, the way of the soul. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it is described how, after leaving the body, the soul passes through different halls of trial, where the heart is weighed against the feather of truth. Anything false, anything heavy, has to be reckoned with. Only what is feather-light and in pure balance with the breath of the eternal spirit can continue. The Tibetans spoke of the same mystery, but they used other imagery. They talked about bardo, the states in between. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it is explained that after our body has come to its final rest, our consciousness continues, moving through different layers of light. The first lights are bright, and to most it is too blinding to behold directly and fully. Because what we see is our own divine nature that we could call the spirit spark. According to the Tibetan tradition, if we recognize this light as our true home, we will merge with it at first glance and return immediately to the source of all light, as in one big embrace. Then no further journey is needed. But in most cases, the soul isn't able to stand the bright light of the spirit as it shines like 1,000 suns. So most souls shy away from the divine brightness and turn towards the dimmer lights of lower nature, towards the lights that feel familiar, because they belong to the earthly realm. And with this association, a new journey, a new incarnation is brought into motion. So far, according to the Tibetan tradition. The understanding that life continues after death is not only found in the East, but we also find many expressions of similar journeys in our Western tradition. We could, for example, mention the Greek myths of Hades and Ulysses, but we also see this theme recurring closer to our own era. Dante Alighieri, in the Divine Comedy, describes poetically that there is a journey that takes place through 3 realms. Through hell, through purgatory, and through paradise. The story of Dante is a story of the journey of the soul. Inferno shows the soul in a state of confusion. In the furnaces of Inferno, the soul is trapped in its cycles of desires and the toll of their consequences. Purgatorio is the realm where purification takes place. It shows the soul that gradually lets go of what binds it. Purgatorio is not a punishment, but a place of healing, where the soul steps closer and closer towards the clear air, while deep love gains in strength as the soul rises. Purgatorio is not a place of punishment, but it is a place of healing, where the soul steps closer and closer towards the clear air, while deep love gains in strength as the soul rises. In Paradiso, the soul doesn't experience the light as something far away anymore. Paradise itself is the love substance of all existence, with which the soul fully merges. Dante writes about this poetically. He says, "My will and my desire became one with the love that moves the sun and the other stars." With these words, he shows us that the highest destiny of the soul is to be united with the divine realm from which all life comes, the eternal love. Goethe's Faust echoes the same theme in an even later time. Faust is a typical seeker. He looks deeply within all aspects of knowledge, power, and experience. He tries to understand the mystery of life through the brilliance of his own mind and will. But in his seeking, he comes to meet his Mephistopheles, his darkness, the human part that emerges when it desires to control and to possess. The part that channels divine light into areas of more or less diabolical selfish objectives. The experiences that arise with this type of attitude always result in pain and failure. So Faust finally learns that true freedom does not come from knowledge, but from surrender. Eventually he is lifted up, not by what he had come to know, but by love itself. He found in love a grace that is even stronger than death. So, whether we look to the east or to the west, we find the same truth that the wise ones have always expressed by saying that death is not an end, but a veil. And the universal agreement always was and is that the soul has to go through a cleansing process before it is able to carry its original light in its complete fullness again. So, from ancient times to this day, the same story is told in many different words with a knowledge that lies beyond vocabulary. But our souls have never truly forgotten about it. So, hearing about this journey tends to make deep sense to it. So, what is this story really? To put it short, the real journey does not happen outside of us, but inside of us, as we move from darkness to light, from confusion to clarity, from knowing to loving. Step by step, we return to the source that we came from. Also in our own inner experiences, we can maybe relate to the same truth which implies that the path after death is not different from the path of life. Namely, what we meet there, beyond the separating veil, is a precise mirror of what we have created here. What we harvest there is exactly what we have sown here. When the last breath leaves the body, the passage that follows is as natural as the changing of seasons. Our body returns to the elements, following the cycle of nature. But our consciousness continues. What happens before and at death is that the life body loosens, and that the life force that gave life and form since gestation is separated from the physical form. Soon after this separation takes place, memories rise to the surface. They flow like a vivid film through the spaces of the soul. Our whole life unfolds once more, but now moving backwards, from the end back to the beginning, until it arrives again at birth. So, for a while, life is streamed before us, and when this streaming is complete, the last bit of life force that still sustained us is reabsorbed by the sea of nature. After this last impression of life is made, the mental body, which contains the magnetic world of our thoughts, begins to dissolve. Thoughts we always believed were ours, the patterns we kept repeating day after day for ourselves, they fade like fog in the morning sun. In this phase, there's great clarity. The noise of thoughts grows still. And in this, our soul suddenly stands in an endless space. It witnesses life as a whole, not as a film anymore, but as a living mental imprint that does not need any analysis or judgment. In this state, knowledge is no longer carried by the mind, but by the heart. When this field of thought also has left its imprint, it slowly dissolves. And consciousness lets go of thinking itself. Its magnetic radiations die out, and our soul stands now clothed in feelings alone. So, after the world of thought and our mental capacities have dissipated, the astral body, filled with feelings and emotions, comes into focus. And in this space, the soul meets everything it ever has sent out in life. Every cause of love, every anger, every joy, and every fear returns. These effects of life's causes wash like waves on the shore of our soul. And these are not to punish, but to reflect the effect of our actions. The pain we once caused to others we will experience in this state as our own. Our soul feels the damage it has caused to another soul. But it also experiences the full effect of each expression of love that touched another soul at any time during its lifetime. For some, this phase is very short, easy, and filled with comfort. For others, this phase can be a very long and painful struggle. But slowly, all feelings come to silence. The astral body, which carried all desires and passions, dissolves. And when this part disappears as the last weight of the soul, only a quiet presence remains. And now the soul stands fully naked. When thoughts and feelings have grown still, what remains cannot be spoken. There's no form, no thought, no emotion. There's only a point of living light, the divine spark, radiant within the microcosm, fully revealed. And now the great choice appears. Will we return to the circle of life? Will we continue learning through matter? Or are we drawn into the field of light, into God's stillness, where all is one in one radiant love? Where a soul will go is not judged by any outside factor, but from within. It is determined by the vibration of the soul itself and by what it resonates with the most. If it has become one with the stillness, then it will follow there, where stillness calls. If it still carries unrest, then it will return to the places where that unrest will be healed. This is why all true teachings say, die before you die. Angelus Silesius said, you must die before you die, so that when you die, you do not die. To die before we die means to go through this process of death while we are still alive. It means that we let our thoughts grow still before death silences them. It implies letting our selfishness dissolve in the balance of love before we are forced to sit with the pain of our actions in the hereafter. When we have the courage to do this, because it does take courage, then our inner death begins. And this death that we then find is not a loss, but a liberation. A return of the soul that slowly starts to rise up again to its original freedom. So, already while we live, we can die daily in small portions that eventually make up a very big portion. For example, we die when we accept and forgive, when we overcome our jealousy, anger, and discontentment, when we deeply acknowledge our wrongdoings, when we choose to stand in silence instead of in the chaos of defense, when we learn to heal all our own wounds, and above all, other people's wounds, by an open heart that brings love to all souls. In this way, we rise into the light that never dims or dies. And on the day that our great transition comes, we will be familiar with the rest of the way, because we walked it many times before while we lived. The difference is that now we can meet the light more fully than ever. Its radiance will meet us in its fullest capacity when we have already learned to meet it before our death. When we practice during our lives how to keep our souls, despite all hindrances, open to the light. Dear friends, from all this we can see that death is not an end, but a change in which the soul, so consciousness, becomes fully naked in the light. We can also understand from this that when we live in truth, we already live in this light. We can see that we can already become partakers of eternity, here and now. So let us not wait for death to begin to live truly. Let's turn our lives into our preparation, into our still bardo. Let's turn our lives into a living temple, built on the foundation of the light of love. Because every thought that grows still in us, every feeling that we release, every act done in love, is a small moment of dying of the ego, which is at the same time a moment of rebirth for the soul into the air to which it belongs. In all stillness, the divine light exists. It leads us through every small and wide passage. It teaches us to die while we are still alive, so that we may truly and fully live in the light on the day that we die.